Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has been a monumental undertaking, a crossover of epic proportions, drawing close to 90 different characters together from across the gaming universe, with an extensive list of stages to fight on, items to wield, assists to lend a hand, and music to jam out to. A true collection of gaming history, the likes of which we've never before seen. Which has left people asking, so how in the world could a sequel ever top this? How could they possibly make Smash 6 even crazier, more spectacular, more hype-inducing? But what if they took a different path? What if, instead of attempting to somehow build atop this tallest summit, the next game built alongside it instead? A quote-quote reboot would allow Smash 6, or whatever it's called, a chance to stand out on its own terms, free of being expected to surpass its predecessor in every way. Let's go over some ways they could do that. From throwing a lifeline to modes and features that have long gone missing, to creating new things to do when you're not up for regular fights, to overhauling the many veteran fighters that have sorely needed some TLC. We'll even go over what a soft reboot roster could look like. A lineup of 50 fighters, more or less, that still appeal to everyone despite its smaller size. So let's see, how do you reboot Smash Bros? Wait, first we need to talk about a hard truth. At some point, a Smash reboot will need to happen. All of that seemingly impossible stuff Ultimate did, it wouldn't work as well a second time now that everyone's accustomed to it. Everyone in the series' history returning was a big deal 5 years ago, but if they did it again, there wouldn't be the same surprise factor and excitement. The thing is, you can only build atop something in the same way so much before things start getting stale. Those of you who followed newcomer speculation during Ultimate's development, you definitely saw how many people were getting burnt out by the end of DLC. If you want to keep things interesting in a series as long-lasting as this one, you can't rely solely on escalating the spectacle and hoping it works. The more you do it, the less it works, and eventually it doesn't. To keep these diminishing returns from dragging such a storied series down, you kind of have to refresh things every now and then. As hard as that is to acknowledge for the really loud part of the fandom that was more into hyping over reveal trailers every few months than actually playing the game. But it's not just about fan interest. You can only demand so much of developers before it affects the finished product. For example, let's look at the number of non-clone, newcomers, and new stages each Smash sequel had at launch. Melee introduced 8 new fighters, and its famous batch of clones, and 26 new stages. Brawl added 18 newcomers and 29 new stages, and new designs for Battlefield and Final Destination, which became a standard for every future game. Smash 4 had 12 newcomers, plus its clones and the Mii fighters, and between its two versions, a whopping 45 new stages, plus Big Battlefield and a Flat Zone compilation stage. What about Ultimate? This grand celebration of how far Smash had come? 6 newcomers and 4 new stages. Fewer new characters than the game that was famously super rushed to make the GameCube's launch. Because Ultimate had to devote so much time and personnel to bringing back and updating legacy content, fighters especially, they had fewer opportunities to add new things. And to do it again, they'd need to do the same thing and add 18 more fighters, plus 4 Echo fighters, 15 more stages, and all of the items, assists, spirits, music, and everything else. And it couldn't just be ported over one-to-one to save time, because they'd need to account for the Switch successor's stronger capabilities, any changes to the art style, and the myriad other things that affect development behind the scenes. This is a big reason why a significant number of fans are advocating for a Smash reboot. Not just so the series is free to do more of its own thing, but also to keep the developers from being saddled with an impossible task. Speaking from my own limited experience making amateur fan games as a teenager, never finished any, long story, video game development is infinitely harder than you'd ever imagine. Even Sakurai himself said he didn't think Smash could pull the "everyone is here" shtick a second time. So, as scary as the idea might sound, especially for folks afraid some or all of their favorites might get Thanos snapped off the roster, it's an ordeal that needs to happen. We can't keep propping things up exactly as they are forever. Celebrated as it might be, there are cracks in the current roster's foundation. Less side content and fewer things to do than in the past, balance patches that hardly ever meaningfully fixed the metagame's problems, and many veterans whose designs have fallen behind and can't get updated because the devs needed all hands on deck just to make "everyone is here" accomplishable. In the long term, it's better to move forward than to try and prop a single moment up forever and hope it doesn't slowly crumble apart into nothing. Because despite the fear and hesitation, a reboot could bring a lot of good things. You know how I mentioned veteran fighters in need of remakes? Previous Smash games have been slow to do this. While Ultimate gave most of its cast smaller changes and adjustments, only one of the over 60 veterans in the base game got a major overhaul. A reboot would mean more of a chance to throw a bone to characters who haven't aged very well. Just imagine Samus getting more of her techniques from Metroid Dread, or basing Ganondorf off his amazing boss fight from Tears of the Kingdom, or updating Sonic to have more varied moves and actually fight like himself instead of being ridiculously campy. Or even minor touch-ups that have slipped through the cracks until now, like finally giving Bowser the voice he's had in canon for the last 15 years. That's an easy way to stand out next to Ultimate, but could a reboot do more? How about revisiting features and modes from past games that have been MIA since? Like a more conventional adventure mode. Matching the Subspace Emissary might be asking too much if we're trying not to be a strain on development, but even something in the style of Melee's adventure mode would be fun. Or what about bringing event matches back? Having a whole set of themed fights to beat gave Melee and Brawl players alternate challenges for testing their skills. Or hey, how about Smash Run? It'd need tweaking to account for people not having their own 3DS screen to play off anymore, but there's a reason why so many fans want this cross between Smash and City Trial to come back. Or how about the old minigames? Break the targets, board the platforms, little challenges tailored to each fighter that encourages players to use all of their movesets. Hell, can we freaking get a boss rush mode next time? Still not sure why Ultimate never got one. But if this is a new era of Smash, why not tap into new ideas too? One concept I've played around with is a roguelike mode that changes each time you play. Different sets of side-scroller stages each run, with aesthetics and enemies from different series present in the game, and as you advance, you'd recruit other fighters, also semi-randomized, to serve as extra lives. Add in a scoring system and/or extra challenges for replay value, and you have a winning formula. Or what if they lean more into exploration and made a successor to the Great Cave Offensive? An expansive map to comb over for treasure in the form of items from different franchises, finding and unlocking other fighters to swap to so you can use their unique abilities to reach rewards you couldn't before. There's potential there. Hey, maybe Smash could borrow from another recent fighting game that forged its own identity and create new minigames that double as ways to practice advanced inputs or tactics. Could have one that helps practice parrying, one for teaching good DI, etc. A surefire way to help Smash 6 stand on its own would be giving casual players more things to do than Smash has had in a long time. Or how about more customization options, so your game and your main truly feel like an extension of yourself? The custom specials feature could come back, with reworks to be better balanced and more inspired, a topic I've covered extensively in the past. Or what if Smash 6 had a custom alternate palette creator like in Rivals of Aether? Could stick to adjusting specific core colors for better accessibility. Mario could have one color for his hat, one for his overalls, and one for his boots. How about more full-on costumes for characters other than the Miis? Might get relegated to paid DLC like the Mii costumes, but I bet a lot of fans wouldn't mind paying a few bucks to use the Fire Emblem crew's promoted classes, skins based on classic Zelda characters, or any of Peach's snazzy outfits from her new game. Or subscribing so you know when more content is coming without having to bank on the algorithm, and so I can inch ever closer to 30K? Much appreciated. What if we extended it beyond characters? What if you could obtain alternate themes for the game's menus with their own music selections? Imagine sticking in classic Street Fighter menu themes, or the Pokemon Gym theme, or any of Fire Emblem's chapter prep music. Or hey, maybe you could let players build their own minigames. How about making it so the stage builder has a feature to create and share your own target tests? Could set a spawn point, place targets and toggle whether they move, and select which characters can or can't be used. Would be a way to let players make an old feature their own, and competitive players could use it to design training drills for specific techniques or combos. One other way a reboot could stand out? Introduce entirely new mechanics, new movement options, a new type of special like shield or grab specials, maybe a tag team feature as a whole alternate way to play. It'd need to be handled very carefully and not make the barrier of entry so high that it scares casual players away, something that honestly isn't brought up enough when people talk about this. But if handled just right, it'll really help a Smash reboot carve out an identity all its own. Alright, now the part you've either been waiting for or dreading. What might a Smash Reboot's roster look like? For this experiment, I followed some guidelines. As mentioned earlier, this is a roster of 50-ish characters, based on this being a soft reboot that refreshes things without pressing the reset button completely. This would also free up resources to be able to give the game plenty of new content beyond just the roster. The returning veterans are a careful balance between older and newer characters, as best as I could get it. A lot of fan mock-ups lean really hard on seniority, but I wanted to keep the new faces around too. Also tried to account for variety and uniqueness. Some cuts were down to ensuring a good range of abilities, thematics, and fighting styles remained. And to help keep would-be development from getting bloated again, third-party characters were cut at a higher rate than first parties. A handful are still present, but since they require so many more steps and complications, we should expect more of them to sit out for a reboot, at least at first. And this roster is just my personal take. I am not the final judge of who does or doesn't matter, so if your favorites aren't here, it's not a knock against them. And remember, this is just the base roster. So without further ado, let's take a look. Here we have 39 veteran fighters and 11 newcomers, plus me's down at the bottom. I might have cheated a little. Some newcomer slots are split between two options that could go either way based on circumstances. I'll explain when we get to those. Couple others have asterisks because they're particularly time sensitive. Could get swapped for newer picks from their series if Smash 6 takes too long to happen. I also left Echo Fighters off for now. They're generally added later on in development based on available time and resources. Let's dive deeper, because I have a lot to explain and a lot of cuts to attempt to justify. The Mario and Expanded Universe cast have the biggest presence for obvious reasons. Notably absent are Bowser Jr. and Diddy, not because they're not good enough or anything, just because trimming this roster down was not easy and there needed to be room for enough newcomers. Zelda's had a bigger overhaul. Losing the alternate Links and Sheik makes things a lot sparser, unfortunately. Hopefully getting new visuals and moveset remakes for Zelda and Ganondorf would help, and hopefully the series' first newcomer in ages makes up for it. Pokemon's also lost several. That said, Lucario and Greninja are very safe picks to stick around. Anyone who leaves them off their mock-ups and says they're less iconic than the Gen 1 Mons hasn't played the games since Gen 1. Charizard is split off from the trainer again because there wasn't enough room for 6 veterans from this series, and it adds another big body to the roster when those aren't easy to come by. 2 different series took some difficult cuts to get the roster down to 50. A lot of people expect Fire Emblem to slim down for understandable reasons, but having to bench Ike and Meta Knight, despite their popularity, shows just how hard doing this is. Don't worry, they wouldn't be gone for good. Metroid lost 1 rep, Samus stays in her suit this time, but gained 1 too. Xenoblade just keeps growing, so getting a 3rd fighter is no big surprise. And while Animal Crossing stayed put despite being such a big deal, I think Isabelle's a prime candidate to get a moveset rework. Would make her more distinct, and not just a disappointing Villagers semi-clone. Then we have a lot of solo and now solo series. Star Fox, Kid Icarus, and Mother/Earthbound lost characters since they've been inactive for a while. Several series with 1 rep unfortunately didn't make the cut. Again, very tough room. Little Mac in particular barely missed out with how much Nintendo likes to reference Punch-Out. I wanted to try and keep veterans from multiple eras, not just the 80s and 90s. Lastly, yeah, we lost a lot of guest fighters. I tried to keep several within reason, even if it came down to just 1 veteran per company. Mega Man fans, I feel your pain, but my gut feeling is if Capcom had to pick one, they'd take the guy who is basically their mascot right now. I also think that Simon might be more likely to stick around than Snake. Seniority might not save the latter. The total lack of Square Enix characters may be off-putting, but with how difficult it reportedly was to get Cloud into Ultimate's base roster, I could see them getting extra stubborn and only letting their characters come back post-launch to squeeze more licensing money out. And don't worry, Steve would get serious adjustments between games. Remember, Bayonetta went from being more of a problem at the end of Smash 4 to being outright mediocre at the start of Ultimate. That's the veterans accounted for, but what about newcomers? And where better to start than throwing a bone to Smash's perpetual loser? As one of the fan favorites who didn't make Ultimate, finally giving Waluigi an invite would help a reboot appeal to fans despite all the cuts. A lot of fan concepts lean into the meme factor, but I'd build Waluigi more around his actual personality. Like the perpetual cheater he is, Waluigi could bend the rules of Smash itself with stuff like a special that pulls out Mario Kart item boxes he smuggled in, containing a pool of mostly original items to keep things balanced. Combine that with mean-spirited moves like a stomping down smash that buries opponents or a double eye poke as his pummel, and we're in business. And if you want more like that, check out the moveset I made for him back in 2020. I've covered several of these characters. Another way a reboot could stand out? Giving The Legend of Zelda its first newcomer since Brawl. And two particular options stand out to me. Impa is one of the only recurring characters who isn't a Triforce wielder, and in Smash she could be a composite of her many appearances. Secret Sheikah techniques, or just the stuff in Age of Calamity that worked fine, would make her a spiritual successor to Sheik while having her own identity. But if they wanted someone from Link's newest outing, there's a potential sleeper pick. King Rauru is now an important figure in the lore of whatever timeline Tears of the Kingdom is in, and he could fight as an unusual heavyweight with powerful light magic and his own version of Link's hand powers, since they were originally his. Two potential paths, and either could help the reboot stand out. Smash always has a placeholder for a new Pokemon, and if Smash 6 is out within the next few years, we're looking at one from its 9th generation. Newcomers take a while to develop and need finished or almost finished source material to pull from, so Gen 10 would need to be out at least a year ahead of time. The new grass starter on the block is the current frontrunner, though not Gen 9's only option, and it's also become a fan favorite. Plant-based powers are a niche Smash is hardly tapped, and Meowscarada's floral flourishes use the element in ways we haven't seen before. Combined with Dark-type illusory trickery and the craftiness of a magician, and you have a flashy fighter all about pulling the rug out from under opponents and subjecting them to show-stopping setups. Waluigi isn't the only one who's missed out. Bandana D's grown so much as a character that he might have the biggest support base of anyone who hasn't made it in yet. And as his many fans could tell you, there's more to this guy than fancy headgear. He's a master spear fighter, taking a weapon type we've barely seen in Smash before and doing all kinds of interesting things with it. Has other weapons too. He's used a parasol in spin-offs before, and he can mix that and other abilities into his moveset to complement his spear attacks. Combined with his courageous streak and desire to measure up to his friends despite his lack of special powers, and you have an underdog you can't help but cheer for. Metroid's doing pretty well for itself lately, huh? And it also has two standout options for a newcomer. Ravenbeak is already famous for having one hell of a showing in Metroid Dread with greater implications on the series' storyline, boasting futuristic weaponry, Chozo combat techniques, and his own set of Aeon powers. He'd be a super heavy with a terrifying presence in battle. But his competition is no slouch either. Sylux is set up to be a major antagonist in Metroid Prime 4, whenever it's fully out, and therefore may be relevant at the perfect time. Metroid Prime Hunters introduced us to this character's electrocuting shock coil, morph ball-like lockjaw form, and bombs that transmit electric beams, but what else is this enigmatic figure capable of? I see two potential outcomes here. Ravenbeak playable with Sylux as an assist trophy, or Sylux playable with Ravenbeak as a boss. A perpetual magnet for controversy, Fire Emblem would hopefully lose some flack with only 3 non-Echo veterans in the base roster. Its newest protagonist was met with mixed opinions, but I believe Alir's potential as a fighter would win over a lot of skeptics. Don't listen to the people who say they just copy Marth, because they can do so much more. Take their high speed and dexterity, complement their swordplay with the martial arts they pick up in their promoted class, and have their specials tap into emblems of characters that haven't been on the roster before. Could summon Lin's power to strike with long-range archery, Sigurd to charge forward through enemies, or Celica to warp you a distance ahead and attack, along with certain other things that are major story spoilers. So we're just expecting these two next game if it's not super far away, right? Dual protagonists with a ton of potential from a critically acclaimed title in a series on the rise. But with a more constrained roster, odds are only one of them would be playable. So which one? Noah is a well-rounded sword fighter who emphasizes damage, range, and positioning. Mio is a dodge tank who draws enemy attention and evades their attacks while wearing them down with twin chakrams, which is only scratching the surface because thanks to their game's job system, they can borrow combat arts from a whole list of other classes. Whichever of the two got the nod, the other would help out somehow, maybe pitching in with certain specials or as part of the final smash. You can't have one without the other, it's just not right. Ultimate broke a running trend of Smash having at least one retro newcomer, and since this reboot wouldn't be burdened with bringing back literally everyone, it could experiment with an old school pick again. Two characters from the NES era stand out most to me, and one is a weird little guy and his trusty motorcycle. Excitebikes had its moments in the spotlight, and one of its riders could fight while on his bike. Attacks could use different maneuvers and BMX tricks, and specials could summon trap features like ramps or mud slicks. Our other option is more fantasy-based. Takamaru may have been deemed too obscure to Westerners to get into Smash 4, but I think people are familiar enough with the mysterious Murasame Castle now that he could pull it off. The fledgling samurai's got plenty to build around between his katana strikes and his array of power-ups and projectiles. That was the old. Now how about someone new? Ring Fit Adventure was a surprise smash hit in 2019, and a recent new IP that made a name for itself is exactly what the doctor ordered for Smash, especially if a sequel hits the Switch's successor early on. The trainee has a lot of moveset potential, most obviously from all the different fit skills they have for attacking enemies while getting a workout in. But there's more than that. Other attacks could come from Ring's air blasts and the various contraptions you use outside of battle. Ring Fit Adventure may be a spiritual successor to the Wii Fit games, but as you can see, the trainee can stand tall on their own 2 feet. So what about guest fighters? I'm going against the grain somewhat with 2 less discussed third parties I think would balance out the base roster. Crazier stuff usually comes through DLC. Despite being overlooked by speculators, the Monster Hunter series has kind of become a massive deal. And since it's only a matter of time until the series' next game, one I could see getting ported to the Switch's successor, the timing would be perfect. And if there's one thing Monster Hunter has in spades, it's plenty of material to build a moveset out of. A whole arsenal of weapon types to pull attacks from, as well as items like shock traps or barrel bombs for fighting like a hunter does. And Monster Hunter Rise brought even more to the table. Imagine working around normally slow mobility by hopping on a palamute or using a wire dash for a burst of movement. The possibilities are endless. As for our other third party, this guy's flown under the radar despite being pretty active lately. With Konami taking video games more seriously again, I wouldn't rule out another newcomer from them, especially one who was an assist trophy last time. But the interesting part would be adapting Bomberman's gameplay to a platform fighter. I could see him placing up to 2 bombs with his neutral special that go off after a few seconds in their classic cross pattern, letting him exert stage control at his own risk because he'd get hurt by him too. Add in the ability to move his bombs with his regular attacks, and he could surprise opponents just like in his game's frantic multiplayer matches. If designed right, any fight featuring Bomberman would be a blast. And this is just one possible outcome for the roster. Plenty of honorable mentions who could show up that didn't make the cut of this particular mock-up, and others who could make it as Echo Fighters. Ultimate only scratched the surface of the concept, so hopefully this reboot would have enough time to bring some back and add more. But that's just the base game. I also have some ideas for how a Smash reboot could handle DLC. Here's how I personally would do it, assuming the resources to do so were available. I would use a similar season structure to what Ultimate did, call them Fighters Passes or something else, either way, but with more structure and more transparency. Each season would come with 6 total newcomers, 3 first party, 3 third party, with the order they would happen in clearly indicated. Would hopefully keep expectations from getting out of hand. Not every reveal needs to shoot the moon for the character to be worth adding. Just ask all the people still playing Byleth or Terry. And to avoid the barrier of entry characters had to surmount for Ultimate's DLC, not every newcomer would need to come with a new stage, music, and spirits. It'd be an option, but not a requirement, and which packs contain what content would also be denoted ahead of time. The total cost of each DLC pack, and the season as a whole, would account for this. And for those whose favorite veterans didn't make the base game, each wave could also bring a few of them back as free updates. They wouldn't be as overhauled as those in the base game, but it'd add to the roster even more as DLC progresses, and their fans wouldn't be left out anymore. I am fully aware that all of this would require a bigger team than Smash 4 and Ultimate had for their DLC, but if it was doable, a DLC setup like this would give a Smash reboot even more longevity. And that is why a reboot of Smash Bros. Needs to happen eventually, all the good things it could bring despite fans' fears and hesitations, and what a soft reboot roster could look like. As you can see, this is a complicated topic. Let me tell you, I stressed over the mock-up roster a lot, and I'm still not 100% satisfied with it. Goes to show how difficult a task the real thing would be. So, are you in favor of Smash resetting and refreshing things, either now or in the future? What do you think a reboot could do to be compelling on its own terms? Ideas for how you'd handle the roster? I'm interested to see what you think, though please keep it civil in the comments if at all possible. Smash speculation gets toxic enough normally as is. And hey, if this video impressed you, or you tolerated it long enough to get this far, I have a ton of other Smash content beyond what I alluded to already. I've covered a wide range of topics, especially this kind of analysis and theory crafting. Special thanks to the following for helping make this video happen, and thanks as well to my patrons for their continued support, even if I kick a hornet's nest like this every now and then. So, until next time, hopefully the future of Smash is a bright one, whatever happens.